When you open up Adobe After Effects, this is the default layout that you have. It's called the Workspace. And in your Workspace, you have the project panel, composition panel. You're going to currently have the render queue, but you also have your timeline is going to show up in there. And on your right, you're going to have effects and presets, character, and we are going to get into all that soon. Starting with the project panel. On your project panel, that's where you're going to be able to create folders, find your compositions, and then you're going to be able to put all your footage. When you import it, it's going to show up in that area. In this case, I'm going to import a visual in there. New composition panel, that's exactly where most of the work is going to be done. We have our new composition and new composition from footage. To create a new composition, you just have to click this, or you come to composition and new composition. With the composition settings, you can set in your dimensions, your frame rate, and everything. In this case, we are going to say 1920 by 1080, which is full HD. 1920 by 1080. Can set your frame rate, can set your duration. Now, in case you're working on something and you're not sure exactly how long it would be, you can use more than 30 seconds. 30 seconds comes as a default, but you can use more than 30 seconds. You can change the number to say 1 minute and 30 seconds. But in this case, we're going to use only 30 seconds. You could also rename your composition. After you have this window, you see everything has a bit gendered out. We have our timeline panel down this side. We have our composition panel up there. After Effects uses layers. So from one layer to another, to another, to another, we are building up to something. How do we find those? Just come up here to Layer, New. So we have Text, Solid, Light, Camera, Null Object, Shape Layer, Adjustment, and all the others. Today we are going to start off with a solid. And with this solid layer, you can assign a color to it specifically. So we are going to start off by giving it a color. When I click color right there, it's going to bring up this window. And we can give a color and then say, and press OK. And immediately we do have a color. Now we've added a new layer. Let's run into our timeline panel and see exactly what has changed. Before, this solid wasn't there. So what do we need to know about this? As we said, After Effects uses layers. So one layer at a time on top of each other. So if I'm going to add something else, and let's add another solid. Okay, and we give it a different color like blue, it's going to go directly on top. You see, it's now the first one directly on top, and I can swap them up. Solids are not the only layers that are out there. We have a lot of other layers like text layers. We are going to add a text right now. So after adding text, we are going to move all the way to our right. Now with the character panel, you can change the size of the text, you can change the font. Personally, I like using Sans, but you could use Helvetica. We could also change the color. And we are going to give it a color like white. And with our text tool, we can easily select it. If I use my selection tool, I can move it around, but I'm not making changes. I can move it around, but I'm not really making changes to the text itself. If I come to my text tool, I can then highlight the text and change it to something else. When I move down here, we have something called title, action, save. It's just really useful because it's going to enable you see which boundaries you can go beyond on the screen and also show you the center point of that actual screen right there. I'm going to come to my right side and select align. Now, this align panel enables us to align text either into the center or on the other parts of the composition. Remember? So that's on the left side of the composition. On the right side, that's vertically in the center and then horizontally in the center. Done with that, we now know how to input text. We now know how to add a solid that acts as our background. And we also know how to edit text, change the character, typeface, fonts, and many other things that we've so far learned. So we are going to do something else different. We are going to try to animate this text. Okay? Now, animating is there are a few animations that you can immediately come up with. So I'm going to use an effect called typewriter, okay? And I'm going to move this back to the beginning. I'm going to add typewriter directly on. And this is what happens when I do that. Types out the what? Project, okay? Back into your timeline panel. When you select a layer, And then you have two options. You have text and transform. When I click transform, it's giving me different options. There are 5 of them. We have anchor points, we have position, we have scale, rotation, and opacity. What you see on the right side, like a stopwatch, is actually used to set keyframes. Now, keyframes are really important while animating. We're going to see how. I'm going to click that. If I click it, I've set one keyframe at one point. And if I move somewhere else and I change any of these values, like that, you see it's also moving. I've set it immediately sets a keyframe in another area. Okay, so when we play this back, that's what it looks like. It's moving all the way to the right side, right then. Okay, I'm going to move, let's say 2 seconds in, and see 0, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds right there. 2 seconds in, I'd want it to be in the center. So I'm going to bring it back. Now we notice that we have 2 keyframes. We have one when it's outside and one when it's inside. To turn off all the keyframes, so be careful with this. Whenever you're using keyframes and you accidentally tap this, all the keyframes go off. So let's create a title with what we've learned so far. So we already have our text, the projects, right? We are going to create a shape. We're going to use a rectangle tool. So that's how we create shapes. Just going to come, make sure no layer is selected. So in this case, a selected layer is highlighted like that, an unselected layer is not highlighted. Just going to draw a small rectangle around that, okay? So we can change its color by clicking that. But I don't want it to be a fill, I want it to be a stroke. So I'm going to increase my stroke and I'm going to remove my fill. How do I do that? I'll come and click this and click that. So that's what happens. I can make my stroke smaller like that. Underneath, so we're going to add like some more text. And in this case, the text is going to be, you can say your name. I'm going to say Joshua. And I'm going to make it way smaller, really, really small. And I'm going to drag it into the center right there. Okay. I'm going to use my align tool and make sure it's actually in the center. And I'm going to make it smaller. Character, just really make it small. And we're going to add more text on the bottom side, which is right here. So just by tapping it, again, we want our text tool. We added our text. We're also going to make sure our text is in the center. Okay. So if in case you get this error, refresh disabled, release caps lock to refresh view, just make sure your caps lock is off. We could change this font and change it, and I'm going to use ITC Avant-Garde. That's the font I'm using right now, and everywhere else I'm using BioSans. So let's animate the text, and we're going to use our transform properties. I'm going to come to scale, give it like 80%, and within 10 seconds, we have it on 100. We are going to add the background. Currently, we have our solids as our backgrounds, but we inputted some footage before, right here, which was called, it was a visual called Spectra. We're going to drag it into our composition. If we put it in there, into our timeline, it's going to go on top, directly on top, but you can also move it to be the last one, and now we have something that looks like that. Now that we added a background and we are having this zoom in a bit with the text, let's preview it and we see. Yeah, we see the word project zooming in also with a background. We are going to come and search our typewriter effect from earlier, typewriter, and we're going to apply it. Now, an effect like typewriter is an animation preset, which means it's probably coming up with a number of keyframes in it. So we're going to open this up. Now, a shortcut to show all your keyframes within the layer is just by pressing U. I'm seeing that that's where it is, and roughly it's taking 2 seconds to show up. So we are going to drag this down to like a few seconds. When we play this back, that's what it looks like. In this case, since it's an animation preset, okay, so it won't show up in the effects controls panel. It's going to instead show up under that timeline itself. I'm going to open up text. I'm going to open up animator, open advanced. Okay, if we notice right now our text goes from left to right, but what if we wanted it randomized? Different characters coming in at the same time. This is how we do it. Really simple. Basically, you come right to there and turn on random order. That's simple. After Effects is really a cool application, and I'm hoping you'll be able to use it to create something else that seems interesting. Now, in the next video, we are going to learn about blending modes. Blending modes are really cool, and I hope you really get to watch it. See you then.